Welcome back to the Berg Podcast. Thanks for joining me today. With me today is Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And our guest today is Anthony.
Hey, guys.
And Anthony, give us the 30-second introduction. Who is Anthony?
I'm a project manager here at Berg. I've been here for about a year next month, and I kind of oversee the special projects division.
Yeah, cool. So special projects is a funny term for one of the divisions that we have. And that's intentional because it encompasses like things the other divisions don't want to do for the most part. But a lot of times it is pretty specific types of work. A lot of it is like residential adjacent, small light commercial, things of that nature, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
And it is our original division. That Berg Construction is special projects. So it's, we had to get back to it because I messed it up a bit when we grew, but special projects is just sort of what we call it. It's a name we've tried to get rid of that name probably 20 times over the years, and every time we just come back to it, and like it does encompass everything that they do. Yeah. So we just sort of stick with it.
Yeah, yeah, and like I think that in part people are kind of like, what does that mean, right? What does special projects mean?
It means projects that are special.
Yeah,
it says it right in the name,
and it usually is a variety of all of the things that we do, right? All on the same site, which is different than some of our other sites. Like if you go into, our landfill work, like a lot of very similar things all the time. You go into
similar location.
Commercial is very similar, site development, site work.
Yep.
But special projects is kind of like a mix of everything all in the same place.
Yeah.
So,
and lately it's gotten to be, it's grown significantly. Special projects, since Anthony's been here and in the year leading up to that, has, that brought Anthony in the first place, has seen significant growth in terms of manpower, equipment, number of jobs, size of job. And it's beginning to really encompass a lot more work than it initially encompassed. Initially, if you go back 10 years ago, special projects was doing residential work, septics, that's what we would say. Now they do small commercial. They do really big residential sites. We've really gotten into some big earthwork projects with them moving thousands of yards now. So in the year leading up to and since Anthony's been here, really, we've seen a tremendous growth in what that team does and is responsible for. Yeah. And Anthony's been a big piece of that with his leadership stepping in and trying to get support the crews in that work, because it has changed what they do. And sort of what does that look like for you day to day? So, if someone's going to try and look at what Anthony does in a day, what do you sort of picture that your responsibilities could end up being on average?
Making sure everything runs smooth, day-to-day operations go well, making sure the field has what they need materials-wise so they can get production and meet goals. Yeah. Kind of just support them as in what they need.
Yeah, and I mean, so one of the things that changed, and Anthony, some of the stuff Anthony doesn't realize probably changed, right? Because it's just Scott had sort of come up with an idea of how this was going to run as we grew, and then he was lucky enough to find Anthony, brought Anthony in and said, like, here's how this is going to go. But one of the big, changes is sort of, if we walk through, especially in special projects, the scheduling of equipment and manpower. Like, what does that look like for you in terms of your responsibility? Because that's somewhere that we're a little different. Special projects is different than the commercial side because of the speed at which they move and the frequency.
Well, when I first started, it was moving equipment almost every day. Now it's kind of slowed down a little bit as we get into the bigger jobs for special projects. But, Joe kind of handles that piece of the equipment moves, and I just make sure we have what we need available for him to move and get onto the site.
Yeah.
A lot of coordination, right? Like you're kind of trying to keep all the resources in the right places at the right times.
Yep.
Yeah. So we're kind of it's a different role. Project management is a different role from a lot of the other things that we do inside of our organization, because you spend some time on site, but not a lot, right? You've got to be familiar with all of the projects that you have going on, but you're still trusting other people to provide you those crucial details and specifications and needs. And then you kind of like take those pieces and you coordinate them with a lot of our outside resources, our rental equipment, our vendors, our suppliers, things like that, to make sure that they all kind of work harmoniously, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously it's gotta sync. If it doesn't sync, like things get out of whack and stuff goes wrong quickly.
Yeah. What is the struggle for you, do you think, day to day? Like as you took on this role, was the role what you thought it was going to be when you came on, or how was it different?
No, I wouldn't say it's. I would say the struggle is getting out in the field. They need to be out in the field more, and making sure that we're documenting everything that gets done accurately.
Okay.
But
you think you got what you were expecting?
yeah,
Because it's funny, because I feel like the way that the role has grown, I wouldn't have really expected it to be the way it was myself. You know what I mean? Like when we came up with the idea of adding a person to support Scott, in my head, that role was going to be Scott still being more in the field. But we grew so quickly that Scott is so tied in with job creation, with the sales and the bidding and the client management on the pre-construction side, that you've really stepped into like a construction side role even more than I had anticipated, honestly. And one of the things Brian hinted at that I'd like to get what your feel is, I know my feel on it is what's the feeling of trying to project manage jobs that you may not get to every day? Because when a client calls me or you, it's very rarely to tell me that they're thrilled, right? It's to tell me there's something they're not happy about, some schedule they need met, something that needs to be added, something. But I wasn't on the site. I don't really know what transpired or what is available. So what does that dance look like for you?
Reaching out to the foreman and making sure, because a lot of the time they come to me directly instead of going right to the foreman who sees that day-to-day operation, and I might not have been there for a couple days. So just getting their opinion on what the client might want changed or how we can get to it effectively, and then get it done.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things, another big difference between the two of the bigger divisions, right? And we have some other groups that do different work in our different divisions, but not as differentiated as special projects and just the pure other civil work is. Yeah. Special projects sort of stands alone, whereas the other divisions interact with each other more in terms of interchangeability of parts and pieces and equipment and people, depending on need. Special projects is much more specific with their crews, and I think one of the things is it happens so fast. Like in other words, if there's a landfill again, if landfill's got a change order coming, we knew that. We may have known it 3 weeks ago, you know what I mean? And we talked about it, and there was a construction meeting. It was talked about, everybody. So even if they call me, it's not out of the blue. I don't know where we are right now. I'd have to figure out what the schedule is. But in special projects, they could call you and tell you something that's just completely different from what you thought you were going to do, and they'd like you to do it tomorrow or today.
The other day, I got a drawing emailed to me with a highlighted line that says, "Hey, we want this done tomorrow." Now, Levi knew nothing about it, but I had to price it back to him, and we had to do the work today.
Yeah. You got to respond quickly, right? And especially I feel like sometimes with the type of clientele that we deal with, there's a lot of customization and a lot of decision making during the project that may not have been considered or foreseen at the handoff stage or at the bidding stage. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so here's another thing that I think is interesting. So, and we won't get into client names necessarily, but we have one group of clients that we've done more than 100 jobs for, and any day could be different than you thought it was going to be.
Right.
And we have another group of clients who they already have a pretty good handle on what the flowers are going to look like on a site when we're not there 2 years later. And so the odd part is that it's the same guys. You know what I mean? It's just based on the rotation of who's available. Mm-hmm. Any one of the guys could end up at either job on any given day. So what does that look like, both for the guys and for you to walk that line where you're dealing with constant change versus the customization is still a change, but it's, much like the bigger civil division, it could have to go through an architect, a landscape architect, an engineer. You can't just change it.
Yeah, not often on our jobs are the engineers involved, but dealing on a client base, it's all in the documentation they provide, right? So if they're giving us good information, we're able to execute it. But if they're giving us bad information, it's not going to go over well. We're going to find the problems as they come.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we deal with on certain jobs.
Yeah, for sure. What kind of drew you to project management? What about this was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be the guy who is the glue. I want to hold it all together and make sure it doesn't fly off the
I
track.
started as a laborer right out of high school,
Okay.
and I just wanted to see what I could do, and this is where I wound up.
Yeah.
I wanted to figure it all out.
Yeah.
So
Do you think, you've been on the other side of it, starting as a laborer, does knowing kind of like what the other half of it looks like, does that contribute to how you try to approach the job?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I wanted to find all aspects of it, so I went into the office after I was a pipe foreman for a little bit, and I decided I want to learn how to do paving. So I went out for a season and was a paving laborer just because I didn't know anything about paving, so I wanted to learn it.
Yeah.
And that's I just wanted to know it all about construction. So, and then I came back in the office as an estimating assistant and found myself here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and sort of, it speaks to what we look for a lot of times when we're trying to bring people on, is people that have taken a varied path, because it gives you more experience, but it also gives you more empathy to know like what's going on and realize the conditions and the situations and what that looks like. Because it's really easy for me to sit in my office and put together a bid and say, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to put in, 340 foot of pipe a day, and it's going to be with these guys. You're going to work 9.5 hours, real easy. It's no problem. I don't know I have no idea at that point what the soil condition really is. I don't know if it rained or if it was freezing or if it was snowing. I don't know if it was hot or sunny. I don't know if the machines are the new machines or some of the older machines, if you have the most experienced crew or the least experienced crew. So it really is important in our project managers to have people in here who are you said the glue, but they're like the connecting tissue that make it go, because you're trying to, the estimator is going to say that the field is unreasonable, like they didn't reach. I had a very reasonable target and you didn't reach it, and the field is going to say that the target was unreasonable. Either way, like in other words, it could be that sometimes I'm slow, and they were like, "What were you thinking? Like we can go way faster than that." I'm like, oh, well, that's, based on what I saw, that's how fast I thought we'd go. And so that role is really important because it keeps everybody happy. And if either side or both sides are unhappy, you can watch a project go south real fast.
Yeah.
So one of the other interesting things off of that is a couple of the projects you have right now will be the biggest special projects we've ever done. They go back to the original days of Berg, where Ford got into a niche and really found a good area and a good group to work with, and built a lot of, did the earthwork for a lot of what we thought at the time were big houses. And you guys have sort of worked your way into that niche again. And so what's that been like for the guys coming out of, smaller home sites, now putting them on, what I would view as like a dream site. But it's a lot of soil. It's a lot of things they didn't have to deal with before.
I think they're enjoying it. I mean, it's definitely a change from what we did when I started. We had, 10 of the same houses that we did, and now we've grown to where we're at now, where we have 2 pretty large jobs that keep the guys going.
And then you have 10 houses that you got to do.
Yes.
Let's not lose that. That
2 big ones and 10 little ones.
Just so everyone's clear on how the growth occurred.
Yeah.
It was not just going from small to big. It was taking advantage of a market that we saw and our ability and the trust that certain clients had in us to give us a shot at these jobs.
Right. It's a change, and I think they enjoy it out in the field.
Yeah. I mean, I know I enjoy it from a standpoint of I get to see them, perform on bigger work. The only hesitation I always have as we do it is, we do preach that, like, we like to see stuff done at the end of the day, right? Like, we like to see a delta.
Yeah.
And we had built an entire team of guys who were used to jumping every 3 days, every 5 days, whatever the number was, sometimes every day. And so that the newness, the delta, always a change, a different site, a new thing, versus now you just sit on a site for a duration, until it's time to go, and then you come back and you finish it. In principle, exactly the same work, right, on just a much bigger scale. But that little change of the duration you're on site was something some of the guys had to adjust to. And I think that we found a few of the guys who really excel at it, who really, like, they they actually were probably not a fan of how much they had to jump, but that was the work. So it's been interesting to watch that and sort of watch the development and the growth and how that played out. What's the most interesting thing you've seen from the field in that transition in terms of all of a sudden having bigger equipment or more guys or different conditions or anything like that? Like in my head, one of the things I'll give you, like where I am, is to watch them explain to me like that they're digging a basement, but this is no longer a basement that's 500 to 1,000 square foot generating a house that's 1,800 to 3,500 square foot. This is a basement that's 15,000 square feet of the basement.
Correct. Requires two 290s to dig.
Yeah. So what has that been like for them in terms of an adjustment? Has it been an adjustment, or has it literally just been plug and play?
I think we're working through it, and I think one of the biggest things is like they're at a site for so long now, like the 4-week look aheads and the scheduling and making sure that they have what they need is kind of the adjustment and what we have to work through a little bit. But I think overall it's been a good adjustment. I think they're working with what they have and getting it done.
Yeah. Because the other thing is, how do you feel about in terms of what have you seen with the soil management? Because that becomes they're two completely separate problems, right? If you're on the small sites, you have nowhere to go with it. It just hems you in. Usually, owner doesn't want to get rid of it. They want to keep it and see you use as much as you possibly can to keep costs under control that they're delivering to the homeowner. It lets them sell the product at a more achievable number. On the big sites, you have more soil and more land, but you
run out of room.
You still run out of room.
Yeah, we have that on one of our jobs right now where we have to move a pile. Like it's just there's no good spot for it on some of these residential jobs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because and Brian, that is one of the things as they go through it is we get onto these sites and they're big sites. It's 18, 20, 30 acre lots, but for permitting reasons, you only permit what you have to, and they're over the 1 acre. But they want to permit as little as possible, partly because they want to disturb as little as possible, but partly because it's just the more you have to permit, the more potential roadblocks there are. And I mean, so in our one job on Chad's Ford, just sort of talk through what some of the roadblocks are on that with them trying to move the soil where they were.
I guess one of the roadblocks was, the bridge, right? We had a temporary bridge that had to go in and getting it from point A to point B. We started hauling it with triaxles, and then we finally got the bridge in and started hauling it with a rock truck. But you can't have a pile over a certain height, so there's not enough room for what you need there. So we're working through that. Yeah.
Yeah, on that one, on the bridge specifically, on that one of the interesting things that's happened recently is that, and this is just a gorgeous property. If any of us could afford to live there, we'd live there. You know what I mean? Like it's just gorgeous. And the picture that the landscape architect would have drawn, I didn't see the picture, but I know what it would look like of this bridge. Would be absolutely gorgeous. It's just really expensive to do it that way. You know what I mean? In other words, like if you're just buying a house that you can afford, you can spend a certain amount of money, right? Like if you come out of our world of what we do, but Brian's going to go buy a new house.
Sure.
If you're going to go buy a house and you can afford what the house costs, then you can justify everything that you love about it. But when you're building a house, you want all these things, but at some point the reality of the cost really goes from being like a hypothetical to more visceral,
Sure.
And I remember when my parents built their last house, the house they have now, that at the end they had gone through, and I mean they had like like oil rub bronze fixtures, and then the builder just has you over the barrel. That's where they are. You know what I mean? Like I can't believe that a faucet should cost $179, but if you buy it from them, it's going to cost $379. Sure. And if you want a credit for the one they had, that's like $5. And at some point, you've just had enough, and you're like, you know what? I just want my house.
I just want to be done. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the really interesting things to watch as we work through these jobs. Is it's hard for the clients because we're first.
Oh.
So any cost inflation from, for instance, that the earth moving and what happened with the bridge, and could they have the bridge? What do we do with the bridge? Put in a temporary bridge. All those things, they still have to buy the faucets. You know what I mean? That's why I make that. Yeah. They got 2 years of cost that they think they know what it is.
Yeah.
And those costs are more defined, right? Like we always talk about it. An electrician, I can tell you, I have a friend who sold his company, but he had a pretty big electrical construction firm. And he knew how many wire nuts every house took. Like, he worked for Lennar and all the big guys. And like Lennar's houses in this model took X amount of wire nuts. Not one more, not one less. If there was one less, you messed something up. If there was one more, you wasted it.
Yeah.
And so you could be so tight with numbers. But in our earthwork, like that's not how that goes. And that's sort of what you deal with every single day is you're walking in with a plan that the plan sounded good. And then all of a sudden, unsuitable, it rains. Is the deadline? Are we going to hold the deadline? And so that's a big piece of what you have to do. And your demeanor in the podcast is sort of indicative of how calm you stay, which is, I'm sure, good for the client, because it keeps everything calm. But meanwhile, I feel like it's somewhere for Anthony, he's like a duck on a pond. You know what I mean? Like the feet are going 100 miles an hour. You just don't
calm
see
above
it.
the surface.
Yeah, but he's calm above the surface. He's going to stay very calm. Is that sort of accurate for how you feel doing it?
Yeah, I'd say so.
How do you deal with that? So what's the outlet, right? If there's got to be something away from work that helps you kind of get rid of that duck on the pond mentality.
I play hockey.
Ah, there it is. Okay.
Ice hockey.
Not anymore. Roller hockey.
Oh, roller hockey. So, yeah.
Retired from that. About
You
10
retired
years ago.
about 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's the outlet. That makes sense.
That
Like,
makes sense. That's
something.
something
Something strenuous. Let a little frustration.
They're still checking allowed, or how
That's
much?
where it all comes out. Not allowed, but it happens.
But it happens. So Brian and I were having a conversation earlier today, and I drove back, and I was literally thinking, I was like, what I should do is get Tom to drop like some trees out back, unsplit wood, and just we'll put an axe back there and you just go back there and just split wood, because it's like that used to be growing up. That was like a way to get aggression out for me, to deal with like angst.
Still productive, but you're going to be exhausted.
You're going to be exhausted and feel better about it.
Let it out. Yeah.
Speaking of ice hockey, did you see the Buffalo Tampa game? Did you see that the other day, 2 days ago, Sunday night?
I did not.
Oh, you got to go back and watch the highlights of that. I only saw parts of it, and the highlight is sitting on my computer in my office because I want to see the full of this. It was the most penalty minutes since the Flyers and Penguins in like the late 80s or early 90s.
Okay.
When they had like 131. They had 108 penalty minutes, I think.
Holy smokes.
The game ended with a fight after you couldn't even give any penalties because the game was over. The referees basically like just gave up. Like Mara said, like, Dad, like the referees they were trying to pull them off, and they were like, just forget it. It's like just a giant pile of guys wailing on each other. She showed me one picture. There was like 6 guys in each box. They had like 3 sets of fights. No goalie fight though. So, because that's the Olympics got them going again with hockey, and then they just as soon as they see 2 guys getting near each other, like fight. They want to see the gloves fly and they want to see them go. And I was like, that's funny. You got to see some old school fights though, when the jerseys could move more. You know what I mean? Get that jersey over somebody's head and it's trouble.
Speaking of the Olympics, I was watching the gold medal game where U.S. scored in overtime.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
On the phone with Scott, trying to keep it together while we're talking about snow, and he's deep into a conversation, and they just scored the game-winning goal, and I was like, "Oh boy!"
Did you keep it calm on that?
I did.
All right.
I did.
I would have just said, "Scott, we can't talk right now."
Yeah. Something else. I'll call you back.
Yeah, I got to call you back. I can't. Not right now, Scott.
That's funny.
What position do you play in hockey?
Defense now.
Okay. Defense now.
Yeah.
Younger days you were forward?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Cool. Well, anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to like, this is my
This
minute.
is your chance to like
talk
to Joe or Levi, let them know.
Anything you wanted to say on the recording.
Anything.
All right, he's got nothing.
All right, put you on the spot. So
nice.
That's probably a good
Scott,
place
if you could not call during the gold medal game, it'd be great.
Yeah.
I know snow's important.
I'd say over or under, how many messages do you have from Scott right now during the meeting?
I'm not sure my phone's been ringing now. It's either Scott or Andy.
Scott or Andy. So, all right. That's a good place to wrap it up. Anthony, thanks so much for taking some time out of your day, joining us. We appreciate it. Folks, we hope you got something from this, and we hope you come back for another episode.